We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Lamed Chesam and Aleph in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 138a. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a case where a person writes over his property to someone else, and the recipient, he protests, he does not want to receive the gift. So it seemed to be a machlokas on the previous summit whether the recipient gets the gift or not. And now Rabbi Abba Bar Memel says it's not really a machlokas. Kan b'tzavach meikar. In one case, we're talking where the recipient protests right away. In such a situation, he does not receive the gift. But in the other case, b'shosek meikara, he's quiet at first. U'levasov tzavach, and then he protests. So in that situation, he does receive the gift. And the Rashbam explains, Kan b'tzavach meikara. Here we're talking where the person protests right away. Mitchila keshemosar lo zes ashtar. From the beginning, when this person gave him the shtar, his chil tzavach, he began to protest. Hilkach lo kana, therefore he does not acquire. Shein mezakin lo ladam balkarcha. You don't give something to somebody against his will. The chovu lo. It's actually even somewhat of a chov. It's somewhat detrimental to the recipient. T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, Sone matanas yech, a person who hates gifts, he will live. And the Rashbam continues, Kan b'shasag levasov tzavach. Here we're talking where he's quiet and then he protests. So then he does acquire the gift. Kevan dekibal hashtar b'shtika, since he received the document and he was quiet at first. Nisratza lizchos b'matana, that shows that he agreed to take possession of the gift. And once he takes possession, ein moel klum lahotzia me'reshusam ma'ashamer yefshi b'matana zu. Simply saying he doesn't want the gift is not going to take it out of his reshus ad sheyitna b'loshen matana, unless he gives it away with a language of a gift. Le'acherim, like he's gifting it to others, or he declares that it's ownerless. Otherwise, he can't simply say in order not to receive the gift once it's already been received. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, let's say the person transfers it to him through someone else, through a third party. First the person is silent, but then he protests. Bonu lemachlokas Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel v'Rabbanan. That's actually going to be a machlokas between Rav Shimon ben Gamliel and the Rabbanan. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, hakosev nechasav la'acher, if somebody writes over his property to someone else, v'hayu ben avodim, and among the property there are slaves, v'yomer halo efshi bohen, and the person says, I don't want them, im haya rabon sheni kohen, so if that second master is a kohen, question is now, does he receive these slaves or not? Hare elu ochlim b'truma, they do eat truma, it is considered like they're the property of the kohen. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, kevan shamar halo, since the individual said, efshi bohen, that I don't want them, so therefore he doesn't receive them. So kvar zachu ben yorshin. So the heirs are the ones that are going to take the avodim, and therefore they don't eat truma. V'havinon bon. We asked on this brayso, v'tanakama afilu omid v'tzavach. What does this mean over here? The Tanakama is saying even if the person is protesting, we force him to receive this gift. We force him to receive the avodim. Amar Rava v'yiteimer Rabbi Yochanan. So Rava said, and some say Rabbi Yochanan said, b'tzavach meikarol. If the person protested right away, dekoli alma lo pligi de lo kani. There's no machlokas whatsoever. Everyone agrees that the recipient does not acquire. If he protests immediately, we can't force him to receive the gift. Shazak ulavasov tzavach. Let's say a person is silent at first, but then later he protests. Dekuli amalo pligi dekani. There's no machlokas there either. Everyone agrees that he does acquire. Ki pligi. What's the machlokas over here between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel? Shazicha lo al yedei acher, that it was transferred to him through someone else. V'shazak ulavasov tzavach, and he was silent at first, but then he protested. The Tanakama holds me the shasik from the fact he was silent at first. Kaninu, so therefore he acquires them. And now when he's later protesting, he's changing his mind, which of course he can't. He's already acquired. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel holds, so what he does at the end shows what he really wanted to do at the beginning. He wanted to protest the whole time. And the only reason he didn't protest immediately was, the only reason he didn't protest until now, the savar, because he thought to himself, why should I protest if I haven't yet actually received? It was being transferred through a third party, so he figured he'll protest when it actually comes to his possession, to his physical possession. That's why he didn't protest at first, but we assume that he was going to protest the whole time, and so therefore, again, this ends up being a machlokas between the Tanakam and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel in a case where it's transferred through a third party, and at first the person is quiet, and then he later protests. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Shchiv meira sh'amar tenu masayim zuz leploni, ushlosh meos leploni, v'arba meos leploni. If a shchiv meira, somebody on his deathbed, he says, give 200 zuz to so-and-so, 300 zuz to so-and-so, 400 zuz to so-and-so. Ein omrin kol hakodim b'shtar zocha. We don't say that whoever was first, he's the one that is zocha. Lafikach, therefore, yotza olav shtar chov. Let's say a creditor comes in order to collect the property, gova mikulam, he collects from all of them equally. What this means to say is, even though he said Tnu Masayim Zuz, the 200 Zuz was mentioned before the Shlosh Meos, before the 300 Zuz, we don't say that the person who got the 200 really got it first. We say they all got it at the same time, they are all equal, and so therefore if a creditor comes along, he collects from all three of them equally. Avol Amar Tnu Masayim Zuz Leploni V'Achar of Leploni. But if the way it's phrased is, the Shchiv Meira, the person on his deathbed says, give 200 Zuz to so-and-so, and after him, give 300 Zuz to so-and-so, V'Achar of Leploni, and then after that second person, give 400 Zuz to the third person. So in that case, it is clear that the person who received the 200 zuz really got it first. So then we say, Omrin kol hakodim b'shtar zoch, we say whoever was mentioned first is going to be first. And lefikach, therefore, yotza olav shtar chov, if a creditor comes to collect, gova min ha'acharon, so you always collect from the last one first, because the first recipient can always say, I left him property for creditors to collect from, and therefore you always collect from the last recipient first, and ein lo, if that last recipient doesn't have enough to collect from, gova mishalafonov, then you collect from the person before him, and lo, and if that person doesn't have gova mishilifnei fanav, then you collect from the very first recipient. Again, in a normal situation, the point over here, just like in a normal situation of a creditor, the point over here is that if all three are mentioned, but without the word v'acharov, so then it's all three are the same. But if you say v'acharav leploni, so then again you collect from the last person first. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Shchiv meira sh'amar tenu masayim zuz leploni b'ni b'chor karoi lo. If a person says on his deathbed, give 200 zuz to so-and-so who is my firstborn, karoi lo, as is fit to him, so then notelon v'notel es b'chora, so he actually takes the gift of the 200 zuz, plus he takes his chelik of the b'chora. Imamar b'b'chora, but if he says take the 200 zuz as his share of being the b'chor, that's the extra portion for the firstborn, so then yado al halyona, so then the Bechor actually has the upper hand. Ratza notlan, if he wants, he can take the 200. Ratza notel Bechoras, if he wants, he can take his share of the Bechora. Let's say that happens to be more than 200 zuz. Essentially over there, what he's being told is take 200 zuz or your share of the Bechora, whichever is more. Similarly, let's say a Shchimeira, someone on his deathbed says, give 200 zuz to my wife as is fit for her. So notelasan v'notelas as ksubasa, she takes the gift, and she also collects her ksuba. Imamar b'chsubasa, now if he says take the 200 zuz as your ksuba, and the Rashbam explains, Leploni bechori karoi lo, again, if he says, give it to so-and-so my bechor as is fit for him, Amrinon lekamon, we're going to say later on Amud Beis, Dahai karoi lo lishnu yiseiruhu, that the karoi lo over here is extra, he didn't need to say it, and therefore we so to speak darshan the extra words, liyipoy koch, we give him extra strength in terms of his collection. Shenasan lohani masayim zuz levad bechoraso, he's giving him the 200 zuz, besides for his share of the firstborn, hilkach notelon vegames bechoraso, therefore he takes that, and he also takes his bechora. V'lo amar karoi lo. Now, if he didn't say karoi lo, hayanotlan bibechoraso, so then he takes that 200 zuz as his portion of the bechora, meaning with the upper hand. Ratza bechoraso notel. If he wants, he takes his share of the bechora. Ratza masayim zuz notel. If he wants, he takes the 200 zuz. To yado al ho'elyona, because he has the upper hand. Kenamina nami lekamon gabehecha damar bibechoraso behedia, like we're about to say when he says the word bechoraso, bibechoraso. So then again, he has the upper hand. That's what we just said. Ratza bechoraso. So notelim he yoser mimasayim. If the bechora is more than 200, he takes that. Sharaino yachol legra mi bechoraso, because the father is not even allowed to lessen his share of the bechora. Afilu Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. That's true even according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, who says you're allowed to direct all of the inheritance to, let's say, one son among the sons, but that's not true of the share of the firstborn. He can't lessen that. We learned that out from the pasuk earlier. Ratzam masayim notel. If he wants, he takes 200 in bechoraso pachos mimasayim zuz. Again, if his share of the bechor is less than masayim zuz, less than 200 zuz, then he takes the 200 zuz. And the Rashbam continues, V'hu adinim amar tenu masayim zuz leploni b'ni stama. Let's say you have a case where he says, give 200 zuz to my son, v'lo amar bibechoraso. He doesn't say bibechoraso, he just says, give 200 zuz. The yadu al halyon, over there also we're going to say he has the upper hand. Kedebarchinan lakamon, like we're going to ask later on, v'dilma karoi lo bechovo kamar. We're going to say, maybe karoi lo just means as is fit in terms of the collection of the debt. Umeshaninon Rabbi Akiva here, and we answer over there that this follows Rabbi Akiva, the Dayik Lishna Yisera, who always, so to speak, darshans the extra language. Im lo amar karoi lo have amrinon de bechovo o bechoraso. If he didn't say the word karoi lo, so then we would say he's giving it to him as part of a collection of his debt, or as part of the bechora, whatever the case is. Kamar, that's what he's saying, Diyitol Masayim, that's what he means to take the 200. So over here, the reason why the language of bibechoraso is used, when he really doesn't even need to say that, it means the same thing anyway. Asal Ashmin, and it comes to teach us, the afagav de parish behedya bibechoraso, even though he said explicitly bibechoraso, afilu achiyitol kol bechoraso, still, nevertheless, he collects his entire bechora. We're not saying he always has yadu al yona. We're not saying that he collects 200 and not his share of the bechora. Rather, he always collects the larger amount. Im he yoser mimasayim zuz, let's say the bechora is more than 200 zuz, to yadu al yona, again, he has the upper hand, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Lamed Ches Amud Beis.